Why hello fellow 21st century viewers, and welcome to my list for my personal top 10 video games of the 2020s so far. With the 2020s being pretty much halfway over with now, can you even believe that? And with all the negativity swirling around the world at the moment, I think that it's best to inject some positivity and cover my favourite games released in the decade so far. Many people like to rag on modern gaming and how money hungry the industry is, even though the games industry deep down behind the scenes has always been about making money, but I think there have been some amazing games released from 2020 to 2024, and in this video I'll be ranking my top 10 from worst to best. The only two rules are that there are no re-releases nor remasters, although there will be one exception to that rule, and only games that I have personally played. So before anyone else says anything or comments something like, "Oh, why didn't you put Final Fantasy 16 or Baldur's Gate 3 on here?" Well, that's why. I'm Rycab Productions, and without any hesitation, let's hop straight into the number 10 spot. Haha, no. So, first, I'm going to give a quick honourable mention to Cyberpunk 2077, a game that admittedly did have a lot of controversy surrounding its release, but that didn't sway me from playing it and actually enjoying this game. CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077 has definitely redeemed itself in terms of public perception, with all of its updates, DLC, and producing a genuinely, truly masterful anime spin-off set in its universe. The game has genuinely great world building, atmosphere and attention to detail, alongside a solid soundtrack utilising a lot of dubstep and what I personally like to call beat beat woo woo music to truly sell its science fiction atmosphere. I admit I am a sucker for mature sci-fi stories, and this game doesn't disappoint with that. I remember the gameplay and combat being fairly fun, albeit not very fleshed out, but the ability to hack into the technology and enemies around you added a lot of great gameplay dynamics, alongside leveling up your character with a type of RPG system. The only reason why I'm putting it in what is essentially 11th place is because I haven't played it since its release, so my memories of it are a bit faded and fuzzy, but I can't deny that it still has its impact on pop culture and the gaming landscape, and I definitely need to get back into it with its new content and fixes. But the game's sheer length and file size has kept putting me off from doing so. Still a worthy mention on this list though. I feel like if I were to play it again it would probably get on my top 10 spot, but that's why it's in an honourable mention spot. Plus the memes are exquisite. At 10th place is No More Heroes 3. Now, even though I am a massive No More Heroes fan, I don't really seem to talk about it that much on my channel. Suda51 gave us one last adventure with Travis Touchdown on his journey to ascend to number 1 in the galactic rankings and kill an alien overlord named Fu, who's an asshole. And the game will remind you multiple times that he's an asshole. This game is honestly such a unique experience and shows how creative and wacky the director can be, bringing his own flair of wacky antics and funny scenarios to the game. In this game you can slice up hordes of alien enemies with Travis's beam katana, against well-designed bosses, have giant mech battles in space, and do side jobs for money such as mining, filling up cars with gasoline, and collecting scorpions. There's a boss fight in this game that's literally just a game of musical chairs, and when you defeat the boss in musical chairs, she kills herself out of shame. And there's another boss where, before Travis fights the boss, he has a rap battle against her. That shows just how nuts this game is. The gameplay is pretty fun and the story has lots of twists and turns around every corner, but I felt like the game was kind of being held back visually by being a Switch exclusive, and the combat wasn't very in-depth either. Hell, the first game has a better combat system, and that was on the Wii. I did enjoy the game, although it did kind of leave me feeling a bit empty, especially since the first game in the series is a masterpiece. I can't really explain why the game kind of has me feeling empty. It was good, but I think the game's lack of combat variety and lack of levels leading up to boss fights is why it's in 10th place. But it was awesome seeing Suda bring back the franchise one last time in 2021, and it's a solid and unique hack and slash game. Running into 9th place is Sonic Frontiers. Sonic's first big 3D adventure in the 2020s was Sonic Frontiers. A huge leap for the franchise, as it's the first official large-scale open-world Sonic game, and it was surprisingly fun whilst admittedly having some drawbacks. The islands were very fun to explore with Sonic's movement system and combat system, which was kind of lackluster, starting to notice a theme here. The skill tree and combat tree in this game is not a tree. It's a skilled twig. Let's be honest, like it's not fleshed out whatsoever. But I loved how you could approach the game however you wanted. If you wanted to avoid the traditional cyberspace levels, you could. If you wanted to just grind in Big's chill fishing minigame, you could. And if you just wanted to explore to your heart's content whilst helping Sonic's friends out in the process, you could. All of the island's climax were truly spectacular supersonic boss fights, with absolutely fantastic metal tunes blasting out in the background, reminding you of the good old days of Sonic, and just how badass the character can be. It was a Sonic game that I thoroughly enjoyed all the way through, which I hadn't felt in a while, but I admit that the ending wasn't the best. Hell, the game even got a DLC expansion a year later, which gave us an even more disappointing final boss and ending. And the game's popping is still dreadful. But apart from those, I felt like this was a truly enjoyable and admittedly addictive Sonic game. Like, I struggled to finish some game sessions and put the game down sometimes, not gonna lie. In 9th place it goes. In 8th place is the funky and fresh spiritual successor to the Jet Set Radio franchise, Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. And oh boy, not only does this game perfectly capture that late 90s Jet Set Radio vibe perfectly, but expands on it as well. The game was an awesome experience, and it's not that complicated. You just have to grind on rails, do sick tricks in the air, and tag up your rival's turf. And I remember it actually having quite a captivating story too. It manages to perfectly scratch that Jet Set Radio itch, whilst also adding its own unique features like the phone where you can take pictures in-game and create your own in-game playlist. The boosting and combat mechanics are also quite fleshed out too, although not entirely. It also sports a more modern, contemporary soundtrack, although a lot of it is populated by more overly auto-tuned rap music, which I actively dislike. Its cel-shaded and striking art style is visual eye candy, and pulling off tricks on pipes, rails and buildings, most of the time accidentally finding collectibles in the process whilst doing so, was a great experience. Like, it's so funky and radical, dude. Although, I remember one boss in particular being pretty fucking annoying. Oh yeah, and the game also has a lackluster and basic combat system, so yeah, the pattern continues. But it's still a soulful, refreshing rebrand of a long-abandoned franchise that rocks, and the modding scene for this game, from what I've seen, is pretty damn crazy. Awesome game. Swallowing up the number 7 spot is Kirby and the Forgotten Land, the first ever 3D Kirby game, although some do debate as to whether it is or not. Honestly shocked it took him this long, to be honest, but Kirby is again another franchise I don't mention much on this channel. I'm not exactly a mega fan of his, but some of his games are good, and holy shit, this one is incredible. Kirby and his friends get eaten up by a mysterious void and are thrust into a forgotten land, and admittedly, it is just the basic 2D gameplay formula translated into 3D, but it still rocks. The gameplay and level design are stellar, as well as the general upbeat and cutesy atmosphere. Like, you know you're in for a chill time with a Kirby game. Plus, the game looks beautiful as well. The main gimmicks of this game, apart from being in 3D, are the upgradable power-ups. Kirby can, as usual, get enemies' abilities by swallowing them whole, but this time they can be upgraded to be even more powerful, and there's also the new mouthful mode, which lets Kirby swallow huge objects and then basically manipulate them, like giant cars and giant fans, to get new abilities. The upgradable power-ups add a lot of experiment into the game, and there's so much side content and optional challenges that it just makes the game a worthwhile time. This is my favourite Kirby game by a landslide, and it just feels so good to play, man. And the post-game content and boss rushes, I remember being tough as balls actually. Like, Kirby games can be hard when they want to. So, that's Kirby Forgotten Land. It's pretty damn good. Honestly, every game from this point on was difficult to rank, but my number 6 spot goes to Sonic X Shadow Generations. This was the exception I mentioned in the beginning of the video, as this game is pretty much a remaster of Sonic Generations, but with juicy new content starring the Latina-loving Shadow the Hedgehog. The second Sonic game on this list is, at the time of making this video, only about a month old, but boy, it sure has left an impact on me, alright. The Sonic Generations portion is practically unchanged and is still the Generations we all know and love, with some dialogue rewrites which were completely unnecessary in my opinion, But the real meat of this is Shadow Generations, a campaign that runs alongside Sonic Generations, and it's absolutely incredible. Shadow Generations has brilliant and addictive level design, bringing back old Sonic levels from Shadow's past and gives Shadow exclusive new abilities. Like the fact that you can freeze the timer for 5 seconds using Shadow's Chaos Control ability if you kill enough enemies makes beating your old time so satisfying, and they somehow made Shadow even more fucking awesome with his new Doom power-ups. After beating one of the stages, I literally had to put my controller down for a second and go, wow, that was such a good level, man. I also must say that this game looks phenomenal. Like, the animators for this game deserve pay raises. I mean, animators everywhere do, let's be honest. In fact, no, the whole art department for this game deserve pay raises. Super smooth animations, honestly. It's a refreshing new take on the Shadow the Hedgehog character, and shows that with enough effort, Sonic games can be truly amazing. The only reason why this isn't in my top 5 is because it's just a remaster with new side content, but hey, it's 2 masterpieces in one bundle, so what more can you ask for? And it's doing quite well so far. Spinning into my top 5 spot is Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time. A very clever title, I must say. The last platform in this list sees Crash Bandicoot travel across alternate dimensions trying to stop Neo Cortex and Entropy from their dastardly plans, only for Cortex to side with him and subsequently betray Crash after Entropy is defeated at the last minute. This game has some of the best and most brutal platforming I've ever played in recent years, and my god, it is so much fun and it's so creative as well. It blends everything great about the past good Crash games into one, whilst also letting Crash use new mass power-ups to spice up the gameplay. Not only do you play as Crash and Coco, but also Dingo Dial, an alternate universe Torna with her controversial butch lesbian design, which did draw ire from a lot of fans, and Cortex with their own playstyles, and while they're not as fun to play as compared to Crash, I still liked playing as them. The levels are so diverse and well designed, but admittedly, the later stages can be unfairly difficult, and I'm never going to 100% the game because those inverted levels are a complete waste of time, to be honest. Like, there's good ways to pad a game out, and then there's bad ways to pad a game out, and those inverted levels are definitely the latter. Also, the animations in this game are so expressive and they really push that Saturday morning cartoon vibe, making the characters very exaggerated in their movements, using a lot of squash and stretch. The game controls perfectly, and there's all these tiny little references and Easter eggs for the most die-hard Crash fans to spot and pick out. Like, this is a quintessential platform experience in my opinion. Like, the game was fun from the very beginning until the very end, whilst also being frustrating, but fun frustrating. Like, it's great, man. But there are 4 more games in the 2020s that I think top this. Strutting into 4th place is the ever so sassy Bayonetta 3. This was probably the most hyped I have ever been for a video game in years, and it definitely deserved that hype, although having some very minor drawbacks, I thought that this game was fantastic. The witch is back, and now she and her friends, who are all redesigned, have to fight a new threat to all worlds called Singularity, who plans to unite the multiverse into one. Yep, I thought it was pretty out of the blue for Bayonetta to do another fucking multiverse story. We're totally not sick of those by now. But the gameplay absolutely makes up for the admittedly confusing story and the very controversial ending. The game still continues the fast-paced, stylish combat of the previous games, whilst also adding new elements like being able to control the infernal demons manually, leading to truly jaw-dropping set pieces. It was so much fun to experiment with the different weapon types, and the music that plays in the background only adds to her iconic charm. I also liked seeing alternate universe versions of the characters too. The game introduces a new character called Viola, and I thought she was an alright newcomer, but admittedly her gameplay did take a while to get used to with her parry mechanic, and Jean's stealth missions are underrated in my opinion. Replaying levels for the best grade and finding all the collectibles in them was a blast, and I know I don't mention sound design very much in this channel like ever because does it sound like a gun firing? Yes it does. Okay, cool. But the sound effects and the menu screens in particular are truly orgasmic, even more than Bayonetta herself. Fantastic hack and slash game honestly, and I'd say that it's probably on par with the previous two. I absolutely enjoyed it. Although I have to mention the Naive Angel mode, which is basically a censored version of the game, where it essentially removes all the nudity, removes what little blood there is, and does some really strange things like censor the dialogue and even censor stuff like the cigar. Like the cigar that Rodin smokes in the beginning of the game is literally a donut. Blood is smoking a donut. Like, could you imagine like some random chap just walks up to him and goes, "Oh mate, you got a ciggy mate? Can I have a ciggy mate please?" He goes, "Yeah, why not?" Just whips out a fucking donut and smokes it in front of me. He's like, "Whoa, what the fuck?" You see, I mean, what's the point of this game mode in a game that is literally rated 18? Like, what? Is it like a piss take or a joke or something? Like, what? It's just so weird. Alright, next game. Into the top 3 now, and we're starting it off with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. The latest 3D open world Zelda game truly didn't disappoint, as not only did it expand from Breath of the Wild, but managed to completely blow its predecessor out of the water. Tears of the Kingdom is a true masterpiece of open world exploration. Now, instead of being able to explore the land of Hyrule, you can also explore the skies above and the depths below, although the sky and depths maps could be fairly boring to explore at times. But Hyrule, on the other hand, was a joy to explore with Link's new Zonai power-ups, new enemy types, and new quirks. The building and crafting mechanics of the Ultra Hand ability and the Merge ability added new layers of experimentation to world traversal and combat, as well as new ways of completing shrines and dungeons. Speaking of which, the 4 temples in this game are a huge improvement from the Breath of the Wild ones, being different from each other not only in terms of aesthetics, but how they're structured. Each one felt unique from one another, and solving puzzles in them with your sage buddies felt like the good old Zelda gameplay that we know and love. I know some have criticised the game for reusing the same Hyrule from Breath of the Wild, which I kinda did at first as well, but I think it's different enough to give me that sense of wonder and excitement again. Like, I wanted to revisit old locations to see how much they've changed and make Link stronger in the process, you know, see how the in-game events kind of unfolded after the events of the previous game. And all this created a very addictive journey to the final epic fight against Ganondorf, and oh man, that ending was incredible, and honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better game. Except I am, because there's 2 more games above this, so... And my number 2 spot is Ultra Kill. This little indie game about a robot who's fueled by blood, who travels down the 9 layers of hell, shooting coins and fighting angels and demons alike, has blown my tiny little mind, and the internet's collective minds as well. I haven't seen a fanbase this passionate for an indie game in a while, and the game isn't even finished yet. The premise of your character needing enemies to bleed on him to heal was enough to get me interested, but the creative world and exhilarating gameplay only make the game even more of a masterpiece. Not only does it take elements from Doom and Devil May Cry, but it manages to provide its own original experience and heaps of addictive fun. The game has PS1 low poly style visuals and awesome mechanics such as being able to switch out arms to parrying enemies' attacks and having very little weapons, although they have so many attachments to them that it makes experimenting with them so good and badass. Ultra Kill can't be done justice with this short segment alone, but this indie shooter is so intelligently made by a small team. In fact, the game was developed as a way for the creator, Hakita, to promote his music, and the game sports a very unique breakcore styled soundtrack, but little did he know just how big the game would get. You could say that this is cheating since the game is incomplete as of making this video, but that just goes to show how incredible this game is. All the attention to detail in the game's intriguing lore just makes it even more of a worthwhile experience and feels like it was made with love and passion, and I always look forward to this game's updates. But there is one game that stands over this one, with a chainsaw, and that is... my number 1 spot, Doom Eternal. The latest Doom game to be released, which wasn't even originally supposed to be released in 2020, it got delayed and wormed its way into 2020, is an absolute peak masterpiece of first-person shooter design. This action-packed, fast-paced, gruesome game sees the Doom Slayer trying to stop the demon invasion of Earth, whilst also exploring more of the Slayer's lore in the process, and it kept me hooked throughout its whole life cycle. The reasons I praise this game are similar to Ultra Kill's in its raw gun gameplay and massive enemy variety, with each demon having its own weaknesses and weapons that are effective against them. I love how instead of having the traditional health bars, the demons instead have parts of their flesh ripped off and bones exposed to show that they're on low health instead. Like god, that's so cool, and it shows that your small arsenal has an impact. Every gun and ability that Doomslayer has feels like it is encouraged to be used, and the level design and challenges all feel so good to play through. The glory kills return and are even more brutal than before, with loads of beheadings, bone snapping and explosions galore. Of course, the game's soundtrack elevates the experience. Mick Gordon and Andrew Hulshot for the DLC's music really pumps you full of adrenaline with all the hardest metal beats you'll ever hear, and the game is just a pure power fantasy through and through. The game supports diverse environments and gorgeous visuals, showing the true scale of the demon invasion, and is packed with references that only hardcore Doom fans will be able to pick up on. Honestly, this is my favourite game in the 2020s so far, and just like Ultra Kill, I can't do it justice with this short segment, and I can't remember really finding any faults with it, and in all honesty, I can't wait to see them expand on the franchise and its brilliance in Doom the Dark Ages. Honestly, it's hard to believe that the 2020s is halfway done so far as of making this video, but there have been some banger games released so far. Who knows, maybe I'll return with an update in 2029 if I'm still around by then. Like, in terms of having an online presence and still making content and, still being alive and breathing, I hope. But this has been Rycam Productions, signing off. Bye gamers.